Hello, my name is Dr. Maya Byfield. My business is The Phenomenal STEMist. I'm so excited to be here in Orange County because it's where I live. I live in Apopka, Florida. And I decided to make this business because I saw a need for underrepresented students to be successful in STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And the best way I can do that is just provide products for parents to prepare them, whether it's a book or online STEM camps or just video podcasting. My goal is to transform this community, especially those who are underrepresented. And the way to do that is to help parents understand their children's minds and basically develop them at different stages of their lives to be prepared for a successful STEM career. Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Hey, 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 it's the phenomenal STEMist. What's going on? I'm starting to hear the feedback again. Y'all hear the feedback? No? You good? All right. What's going on, everybody? I hear it.
Mm.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh, I'm talking to y'all. What's going on to y'all, too?
Doing well.
Listen, it's so good to be back. I'm with the phenomenal STEMists, Dr. Kamoy Harris, Jamal Hardis, Mr. Jamal Hardage, Mr. Howard Webley. I'm so grateful for you guys to be on with me today, and we're gonna talk about something pretty interesting. Turn yourself down a little bit. Somebody turn your volume down a little because I'm hearing a lot of feedback. We're going to talk about something pretty interesting today, which is navigating salary negotiations. Navigating salary negotiations. And that is something I find I hear myself. Somebody. That is I find this very difficult. What about y'all? Do you like are y'all in the negotiating salaries business? Myself in academia as a professor, they not much not negotiations of salaries. Is that something that happens in y'all in you guys field a lot? Talk to me.
For me, yes.
Okay.
Particularly if you're working with a private institution and you can, you basically have individualized contracts. Yes, that's something that typically you have to do. I think it's different if you're working for a government agency and they have just standard, um, contracts for whatever level you're entering at. Then that has less room for variation. But certainly with private institutions, yes.
So just to remind you guys who I'm working with here, Dr. Kamoy Harris is a physician who works in a hospital system. Jamal, you are a uh you're a computer scientist, but you are in upper management at a pharmaceutical company.
Mm-hmm.
And Howard, you are, a microbiologist that works for a government agency. We try to keep it pretty light and safe in this space, okay? So that, everybody gets to keep their job. You know what I'm saying? I am a I am a biologist who works in academia. So different types of STEM professionals. We're all life scientists for the most part. Well, actually, Jamal, you're not.
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy because I work with a bunch of
You
people
work
who
for
are
one.
in bio, yeah, who are
You
scientists.
work for life science,
Yeah, who are, yeah,
but you're computer science working for life science, which is cool.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so in our space, it's a
yeah.
little different.
I know for,
Yeah, go ahead, Jamal.
yeah, for me, what I've noticed is, in the different spaces, you obviously can get a general idea of how much your skills are worth. You know what I mean? Whether you're just browsing on career builders or LinkedIn, whatever, right? You can kind of get an idea of, okay, I know this amount, I know where my skills are, this is how much I should be making, right? So you have a general sense of that. But um, in real world, like I know for computer scientists, right? Companies have caps. So it's like, okay, you know what? This is how much we're literally flat out going to pay for a computer scientists. So what I found is that, like, right now, I work for a pharmaceutical company, right? So their main driver is like biology, it's the sciences. So that's really where a lot of the focus, a lot of the understanding is, right? In upper management, like that's kind of the language they speak. So, it's when they put a price tag on computer science, sometimes it's a little different than if you go to like a Google or a Microsoft, where like that's all they do. Or if they were ramping up a project and they needed a bunch of developers to do this, and there was someone leading the charge that was a computer, you know what I mean, in that field, then that sometimes that shapes the numbers as well. So I think a lot of it depends on kind of what you're attached to, because you could be a biologist and be in a totally different space and work, and the way that they view the pay structure for that sometimes is different. You know.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into talking about this concept of undervaluing expertise. That tends to
Mhm.
happen, but yeah.
Mhm.
My mother's saying this that she's not seeing it on YouTube, and I'm live
What?
on YouTube. I'm live on YouTube, so I don't know something's wrong with her. I don't know if something's wrong with her thing, but yeah, it's gonna be okay. We here. All right. So first question. First question. But I'm glad you're here on
Mhm.
Facebook. That's the beauty of having it on multiple platforms. Shout out to
Multiple.
LinkedIn. Shout out to YouTube. Shout out to Facebook. But negotiating is intimidating. It feels real intimidating. How can someone with little experience in HR conversations, like how can we build our confidence to advocate for ourselves? I'll start. Like I don't get to do much negotiation with my salary once. So as an academic professional, we have, especially who works for a state institution, we just have a standard what we get paid. And actually, you can go and look at how much I got paid last year. That's the embarrassing part. You could go and look in my business, right? But in the beginning, they have these steps where you join in, and they say, listen, if you have this much experience, this much, you can start at step 6.
Mhm.
So what I was it was important for me to do was make sure I use everything that I have done, being a adjunct at a community college, being a postdoc in an institution. I made sure that counted, and some people may not have thought about that. So sometimes you got to really think about everything that you have done and be an advocate about what you have done and make it count. What about you guys? Like, how do you think we could build our confidence? Doesn't negotiation seem intimidating? What y'all think?
Yeah, to me, I think it's a lot about kind of being confident in your skill set. So uh, when you're when like as a, it's I'm sure it's different for biology. Biologists, but like as a software developer, right? There's so many tools that I can get to practice, and not only can I practice them, but most of them are free, right? You know what I'm saying? So if I take those things and I can demonstrate that I've mastered them, then a lot of the negotiating stuff becomes kind of a mute point because, like, say for instance, I go in and I know the skills that I have, and I approach an employer. I say, look, I want, I put out my fillers. I want to work here, right? It'd be nice. It's awesome. What would happen is they come back with their number, and you either like it or you don't, and you can tell them why or you can keep it, but the demand is at a level to where if they don't if your skills are right, if they don't pick you up, somebody else will.
Else will.
You see what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And so a lot of that becomes you setting your number at what you want. So, if your skills are right, then the confidence comes because right when you put your resume out there, people are trying to come and get you, right? And so then it's like, okay, you know what? Look, um, sometimes it's a pain to kind of to look for jobs, and it's never fun. But the idea is that if you have kind of the skills that people want, then that kind of becomes the confidence booster because it's like, hey, you know what, this is the number that I know I'm worth. Can y'all meet that? If not, then I have to go to somewhere else. And but that's the only way that happens is if you're kind of like a top performer, if you're digging in and actually, you know, have the skills that attract people, right? If you don't have that, then it becomes super difficult. Like if you're not a top performer and you don't have the skills, then you really have no room for negotiation,
Negotiation.
you know?
But I think it also has to do with the value of the job itself. Like I just feel like in teaching, people
Mhm.
feel like anybody could do it. That's the issue. I feel like in teaching, like, oh, anybody, just get somebody and teach, and they can't.
Mhm.
But somehow they don't value negative aspects to teaching. It's like, well, especially in college. Well, if the kids don't get it, that's on them. It has nothing to do with the level of communication skills of the teacher. Like I feel like I have a lot of great skill sets in terms of teaching, especially teaching biology. But if people feel like it's a dime a dozen, then even the worst teacher could get a job. So I feel like I don't have the leverage to say I'm an awesome communicator of science, man. But they like, well, even if you're not a good communicator of science, just teach. And if the kids don't get it, too bad. So how do you fight? How do you
Well, I
negotiate
don't
that?
know. I think there still is I think there still is that, right? Because even in
Yeah.
programming, like I see it all the time. Like there's people who just know how to like there's different levels to it, right? Like there's
Mhm.
somebody who says, "Okay, you know what? I can program, I can make this go." And there's someone who knows the intricacies of how to do it professionally, right? And so, sometimes those get lumped together and it kind of dilutes what's going on. And the kind of the same thing goes for teaching, because my wife, she was a teacher, and it was the same thing, right? She put in all this time. She was a great communicator of getting the information to the kids, but how does that translate in a field to where the pay is set, right? You go
Right.
in and it's like, no matter what you do, this is how much you make. So
Right.
sometimes it's a little more difficult than others for teachers. I still think there's a way for you to display, and there's always a platform for you to kind of show like, hey, I go and I can do this. It's kind of like how you have your niche with the grant program, and how you have, so like those type of things matter, right? Because it shows that you can manage money, it shows that you can manage students, right? Like, taking them there and kind of building up this, to an extent, building up the school as well. So like, those are things that matter. Right?
Yeah, they matter. What about you guys?
So one of the things that's coming to my mind as I'm listening to you guys, before I even state my situation, I'm thinking about like one of the key things to bear in mind is to be mindful of your work environment, right? Like take stock of your work environment and how where your skill sets and so forth, where you're valuable, where in your community, your work community, your skills are actually of value. Because I'm listening to you, Jamal, and I'm like, well, the question I have for you is, okay, so someone like you or people like you in your arena, how what's the value in your workplace, in your organization that you work in, versus someone like you in a Google or at a Microsoft? You see what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
sounds to me like, are you more able to leverage who you are and what you are in your sphere, more so than if you were to be in one of those sort of
Yeah, it's
yes or
different, right?
no?
Yeah, because like there's some places where like where I'm at now, because it's to an extent is research. You can kind of say it's academic, right? They put a
Yeah.
heavy emphasis on PhDs and things like that. So, say for instance, when I got my master's, right? That was like that's like I automatically got a bump, got a rate. You know what I mean? Because that to an it was it was it was
Value.
improvement for me, but at the same
Yes.
time, the company still recognized that because
Yeah.
it's more of an academic type company. So like if I was to go
Yeah.
get my PhD, it matters a little bit more, right?
Mhm.
Than my programming to an extent, because where I'm at, the programming is important, right? We have to get it right, and what we do matters. But in the whole, what I mean, the company itself is really weighted on research, is really weighted on scientific discovery. So like everything you do kind of has to point to that. And so yeah, your computer skills are great, but they don't. This isn't the place to where, like at Google and Microsoft, like they probably have programs that kind of foster a lot of development, right? And to build, like, what I mean, like they have pathways for that. Where here, the pathways for learning are more biology based and immunology based. You know what I mean? And so yeah, so those are the different things. It's still value. Like there's programmers everywhere, and some, like it's rampant. So it's important. It's just science is the core of the company.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Sure.
science is the core.
Because I'm thinking even like, so how important, let's say, would be IT security in your
Mhm.
environment?
Well, that's an interesting, because it's important, and it's actually super important because we have threats coming in all the time. But uh, the interesting is how they handle it in terms of dealing with like real people in like the technology space. So if you have people in digital that are saying, okay, we're going to lock down a bunch of things to make it secure, in a programming environment where this is all they did, right? They would lock it down, but the avenues to do stuff would, be advantageous. Like it'd be good for programmers, right? But a lot of times they lock it down, but they lock it down in like a business context, right? Where, they treat programmers and all the stuff as business, where like we might need special tools or we might need special access to an extent. So the gateway to get to stuff is probably a little bit tougher because the security, because of security. But yeah, it's an interesting, that's an interesting one, because they don't approach it like development first, right?
Okay.
They approach it more so as a business standpoint. Like they're trying to block out external threats, but they're also trying to keep everybody else from doing stuff that would break them.
Swooping.
Yeah, from doing crazy
Yeah.
stuff. You know what I mean? And so they don't want the normal people that are internal to go out and do anything that would harm the company. But development wise, we still need to be able to do it. So there's always kind of like a push and tug about kind of access and how we do stuff. So yeah, it's a little different. I mean, the
Wow.
government, shoot, I'm sure the government's the same way, right? I'm sure
Sure.
y'all are trying to get stuff, and let the lab computers, the lab PCs. That's always when you're trying to get your instruments on and all that stuff. Like, there's always.
So that's why I say it, because I'm thinking of, because I always think that way, and we've spoken about this on the cast before, where we say, leveraging what you do have, and I'm a big proponent for thinking outside the box. So if I was an IT person, I'd probably think about like, well, where can where needs where needs somebody like me that doesn't have a lot of people like me,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, where can I fit in, So like I got a buddy who's an IT person, and he's an IT person with I think a venture capital
Hmm.
company, like you know, and
Yeah.
so he leverages what he does really well, and they compensate him for for that.
Hmm.
But okay, so like, in the government is very similar to your situation, Maya, where you come in, and there's grades and there's steps, right? And so same thing, if I tell you what grade I am, you can look it up and see, how much I make, right? So, but two areas came to mind in the context of what we're talking about. There's the oh, I'm looking for, there's my annual assessment that comes up, right? And it's like, okay, I can vouch for myself for an increased step.
Hmm.
We do have that, so normally you get it after a certain number of years, a certain amount of time. It's a time-based thing where you get your step, right? Within your grade. And but you can opt for negotiating and saying, hey, I've done this. I should be bumped a little further along the
Hmm.
step ladder. We do have that. But like you said, Jamal, is you gotta you gotta be, you gotta be, killing,
Irreplaceable. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to
irreplaceable,
be
killing,
high functioning. You got to be.
for you to get through with that one, right? But then the other area for negotiation is when you do, apply for a new position, and that
Mhm.
position is, let's say, a promotion, um, in and of itself, and you could say, hey, I think I'm also I think I'm also viable for this, for a little bit more along the step ladder, especially if they're offering it, because a lot of times they'll promote positions with these additional incentives. So but you got to sell it. So there is an aspect of, sell yourself for, sell that you are eligible for it. So there is an aspect of negotiation. It's not that prevalent with when you have it, standard grade levels and steps, such as in the government, but there is an aspect of you know um making yourself be known,
Make
right?
yourself be known.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kamoy, we women, we get a bad rap of negotiation. Like they say that women, like I heard a statistic, like women can be 75% what is eligible for a job, and they will shun to go for it because of that small 25% where they don't feel eligible, while a man will be 25% eligible for a job and he will apply, and like the level of confidence that men versus women have in the negotiating table, also I hear there's a drastic disparity. Like, how can someone build the confidence? Do you have the confidence when you negotiate, or do you try to negotiate? Do you have confidence? How, what you think?
I've definitely gotten better.
Okay.
I've gotten better mainly because um, I had, I think I was surrounded by the right people.
Mm,
Before I even applied for my first job, one of my mentors said to me, I need to just, and this was unsolicited advice, but they're like, I just have to tell you, as a woman, I can tell you that you're going to go to apply for your first job and you're going to accept less than what you deserve
mm-hmm.
because that's what women do.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
she encouraged me to make sure that I ask for what I'm worth. And what I did was I did a little bit of research
Mhm.
to figure out, okay, what is the going rate based on where I am at my level? I'm fresh attending coming out. And make sure that if they're most likely gonna go under that. Make sure you ask for more. And at least most times, at least in medicine, they don't ask to necessarily, justify why you need to get that amount, because a lot of times it's obvious you completed med school, you completed residency. Some of us who've done fellowship, you're board certified, like, so you have the qualifications. Sometimes you have to talk about, the, the geographical region, the patient population that you're going to be taking care of, things like that, to kind of justify why you should be getting more, or even just what the market value is in that area. But you have to do a little bit of research just to find out that information. So when you're going into the negotiation, okay, this is what I should be asking for. It should definitely not be less than that. And if I have this additional training, I should be asking for this additional thing as well. But I think a lot of that I developed over time, mainly because I was warned about it. Didn't even realize that it was something that and she was right. I would have probably just said, okay, I'll take that. Having somebody give me that little push really helped me to say, hey, you should ask for what you're worth, and don't be afraid to ask for what you're worth, because you've done the work to qualify yourself, and you should get paid for that.
Mhm.
You've done the work. So talking about you've done the work, how can we STEM professionals be better at framing our story? And achievements to demonstrate that we're worthy for this increased salary. Like, I feel like, and you could point me out if I'm wrong, at least in the life sciences, we have a steady path. We go to school, we do well in school, we get our master's, we get our PhD, or we get our degree, or we get our MD, right? Like, it's so laid out for us.
Mhm.
They were like, "You're just a dime a dozen. How can we tell our story?"
Yeah, I think for us, it's like the projects, right? What have you worked on? And kind of where do you see yourself? So, someone, like, I was talking to another guy not too long ago, and it's just the idea of keep learning and keep growing. So I think as long as you can show that progression, you're kind of good, right? And there should always be a way for you to show that, because your work only speaks for a small portion of what you do, but in order for it to really shine bright, like, you have to actually go out and trumpet what you did, right? And not so much to say I'm great and I'm the best, but like, you have to go out and say, all right, you know what, we built this over here, or this is what I did. So that's it. Like the grant program, like, there's other things that are going on too, right? Your graduating class, how many of those become doctors, right? Like, where have these people been, and yeah, that's the biggest thing. The tougher question is, where can you put yourself in position to work on those projects, right? You know what I mean? Like, what companies do that, and how do you navigate that space, right? Like, are you doing free projects and volunteering, or do you have to leave one space, one company, to go work for another company to work on a project X? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty when you're trying to navigate those waters.
Um, that's so true, and I find myself, I need to 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 get on more opportunities, because, like you say, my grade is pretty much the same. My salary boosted drastically when I got a
Hmm.
grant,
Hmm.
and so I gotta told myself to get on more grants.
Yes. Hmm.
That's how I increase my wages. George Byfield, shout out to George Byfield, my namesake. He has like, we cousins. You from Jamaica? Where in Jamaica you from, George? Um, he says devaluation and ask what you're worth applies to black men too. So I was talking about women in general, like they talk about the statistics, but black men may also, or according to George, do also have that same devaluing. And we'll talk about imposter syndrome a little bit. So,
To
would you
me,
agree,
yeah,
guys?
to me, I don't agree with that. I think that there are certain fields. So, like, if you're trying to just come out of school and get into business, or like if you're trying to come out of school and probably get into finance, things like that, like, those are fields that are kind of, to an extent, subjective when hiring. But in the STEM fields, like, the need is still balanced, but it's pretty much, if you can show that you can solve this problem, we're gonna take you. You see what I'm saying? Like, I've never had any pushback of, all right, you know what, um, because I've worked on teams with that are super diverse. I think the one thing that kind of hinders us as African Americans is the fact that how many there's not that many people that are in the field, right? And and that's what I love about what you're doing right here. Is we have to get people to get into the math, to get into the space, because it's not an easy path when as you're climbing through the ranks, but the reward is good. But yeah, to me, I think that's how I feel anyway. I know that
Well,
when we're looking for people, it's like, hey, what can you do? And if you can do something, if you can show that you're qualified, then we'll snap you up. And that's how it's been for all the places that I've kind of worked at.
But I feel like
Not to
what
say
George
not
is
to say that's
saying,
everywhere, but I know that for the most part, like, you'll have people that don't hire right no matter what, you know what I mean? But for the most part, I've in the STEM fields, like, it's
yeah.
so
And go ahead, Howie.
but so here's the thing, and I think this is what we're gonna get into with the imposter syndrome. It's not so much the devaluation. I feel like is more. This is similar to what Kamoy was mentioning, where is how valuable do you feel
mm,
versus will they pay me? You see what I mean? So I may have all that I need. I may have it on paper, but we're talking about negotiation here. So the question is, will I feel confident enough to ask for more? Or will I feel like, well, I'm, man, I might as well, I, I should just take this job.
Yeah.
I should just let me not rough another. I don't want to make them feel like I'm that dude. I don't want to make
yeah,
them feel like you
understand.
see what I mean? So it's more so coming from us and our perception of where we are and
Yeah.
the value of where, our value in the place in the space that we're trying to navigate, that we know that there's not many of us.
Hmm.
Will you challenge will you do what may be or may not be challenging the system.
Yeah.
The system may say, nah, man, we just want workers. We just want people who have the skills and the abilities, and we don't care what your situation is. Yeah, but when I did my postdoc, that's not how they made me feel. When I did my postdoc, that's not how they made me feel, a whole different way. So now I don't know. I'm not sure, right? How I should go about potentially navigating this new space, because I don't know the culture here.
Oh, that's a true point. I think that goes back to what we talked about some months ago about mentorship, right?
Yeah.
Someone has to teach, right? Someone has to train so that you can see, that, hey, you know what, I am at the top of my field based on what I've done. You see what I'm saying? And yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, and that's why Kamoy was saying that's why her mentor gave her a talking.
Hmm.
Were you able to frame your story, Kamoy?
Come on.
Like, did you frame a story? Like, it's
Um, so initially I didn't have
yeah,
to, but as my career was progressing, yes, definitely. Because now you're at a point where you have acquired
right.
additional skills, and you need to be actually
Hmm.
requesting more. Um, and yes, we've had to do that, and it was a little
Intimidating,
tough
yeah.
in the beginning. Yeah, because it's intimidating, like you said. It's very intimidating. Like, wait, I should go ask them for more money. But I was able to do it. I will say one of the things that and this is something from my past, just so nobody's even thinking this is my current situation. But
Disclaimer: this is not her current
disclaimer,
situation.
this is yeah. It's interesting because when I actually had to negotiate that, one of the things that was said to me was, um, don't tell anybody about this. So they gave me what I wanted, but then they said, don't tell anybody about this. I was like, that was strange, and but it made me realize that you are worth that because they were willing to meet you where you asked for. But it also made me realize, how many other people are getting this is happening to, right? And if they don't have, the appropriate guidance or the appropriate mentorship to help them to navigate these waters, they're not getting what they deserve.
And I've been to some seminars about workshops with negotiation. I've heard that's the first thing you do is ask other colleagues how much they make. That's what, and I'm like, but they say ask other so that you can now leverage. That's why they probably told you don't tell nobody, because like if we're giving you this, everybody's gonna be like, well, oh, if they giving Kamoy this, then they better give me, right? And they're gonna negotiate up. So that's a tool or a skill set, y'all. I don't know if I could do it, but that's what they told us to do. Go ahead, Howard.
That's significant thing you mentioned there, because that's the kind of thing, that's the other issue that exists, where when our counterparts see what we are getting or see what we are able to achieve, it's almost like, oh, then I must.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Oh, then
Matter of fact, 20% more.
Right? Like,
Right.
it's like it's whatever we are promoting ourselves as achieving or have achieved, it's to everyone else, oh, that must be attainable then. It must be like, and then it ends up sort of bringing, when we talk about the devaluation, right? It's like, why are my once and I've seen that in some of my spaces where I feel like where, when I talk about what I've done and I tell the story, I feel like it's all of a sudden the story is completely up for grabs. All of a sudden the pathway is completely up for grabs. And I don't mind educating. I don't mind telling the story. By the way, in answer to the question, like everyone loves a story, right? I think one of the things is we got to make sure that the story is the story that actually sells us.
Right.
It's not a sob story. It's not it's a story of, like you mentioned, Jamal, like it's a story of of project development. It's a story of I've done this, I've done that. It's a story of what I've contributed to, previous employers, and what I could see myself, the story I could see myself continuing to write where I'm at right now, or where I'd like to be, so everyone loves a story, and everybody, because the story is also something that, when you tell a story, other people see themselves in that story, right? And this is similar what we're doing right here is expressing stories. So I think when someone can say, man, I feel where you're coming from, even if they're not saying that, but in the evaluation of your story and of your request, right? A lot, and I've heard that a lot too, where I've heard where they say, managers, when they'll give it to who they who the one those who they see themselves in, you know it's like, if you once you're expressing, who you are, and then they can identify, they can vibe with where you're coming from, and they see themselves along that same pathway, then they'll commensurate with it,
You talking about
So
that
this is why
systematic now, how we
yeah, and this is
that's
why it's important
that's
to
crazy.
not give a sob story about, growing up in the hood and I made it, like, cuz somebody may not be able to relate to that, but they will relate to, man, I struggle in organic, but I did well. I've had,
Mhm.
we may have to, as black people, come out of our stories of
Mm-hmm.
culture and connect STEM wise, purely STEM wise, with the person, because that's what they're gonna see. Like, to Howard's point, they're gonna look for themselves in you. And what we do have in common is we rolled in this STEM thing together. We went through hard STEM classes together. We did a postdoc. Like, we struggled through a postdoc. We struggled through medical school. We struggled in creating software development. You got to connect with people where they are. I love that, Howard.
But
Joni says she has no issue giving insight on her salary because that's how we get low bar. But Michelle Ali, Howard, you want to say something?
Yeah, hey, don't because I know this is a STEM thing. This is a STEM thing. Don't get rid of your story. Don't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
don't throw your
Mm-hmm.
story to the side. Like, don't just know your audience, right?
Know your
Know
audience.
your audience.
Yeah,
So there are different spaces that we navigate. See, that's the thing about, the people who people of color, people who underrepresented, groups. Our stories are so wild. Like, our stories are so multifaceted
yeah,
that they're legitimate for a number of different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a part of our diversity. That's why we are needed,
yeah.
because we add to the diversity. So
Yeah.
don't get rid of the story. Just know your don't get rid of your whole story or
Whole
something.
story, but don't
Yeah.
let
Yeah.
it be the total connect. You got to still be able to
Yeah,
connect
know
with
your
the know
audience.
your
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah. In terms
Um,
of, oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Jamal.
I'll say, in terms of storytelling, maybe about a year ago, I audited a class at Rollins, right? It was I can't remember, it was something about IT, but like, I audited it, and the guy that was teaching the class had a lot of professionals and CEOs come and talk to the students. So one of the CEOs came through, and he mentioned that his daughter just started working at a law firm, and he 1 year she called him up. I think it was her first year, and it was the time at the end of the year where you go and you talk about the stuff you've done, the past year, right, with your manager. And so he's like, well, have you wrote that stuff down? She's like, well, I really didn't catalog it too much. And then he's like, next year, write everything you do, to like the main parts of it down, so that at the end of the year you actually can look back and see exactly what you worked on. And then when you sit
Mm,
down to talk and do that end of year assessment, you have a concrete block to go back on and say, this is exactly what I did. And definitely, if you're a high performer, that's going to look pretty, unique. And so he said that his daughter took his advice and she did that. And she ended up having that year assessment, and manager's like, you did all this? And then she
mm,
ended up going from like second year to like fourth year or something like that. You know what I mean? But she jumped
wow.
years, all from the simple fact that she was able to point to,
Write it down.
yeah, her past. Because other than that, a lot of it is just you're just working, you're just going. And you don't really, if you stop and you look back and you realize, wow, I actually accomplished some stuff, right? The stuff I did actually helped, or things like that. So it's that's an important part, because that's telling the story, right? That's telling a big story of what you've done. So yeah, that was impactful for me. Because even for me, like, I did, it was one of those things where, like, I kind of do it. Like, I have my managers are amazing, right? So they fill in some gaps, and like they catalog, like they know a lot of this stuff, and so it's still something that I have to take
God
ownership
bless
of
your
too.
managers.
Yeah, yeah, it's still something I have to take ownership of as well. But it's like, all right, the stuff I forget, they'll remember, and I'll be like, oh man, I can't believe I did that. You know what I mean? Or like vice versa. And so, but it's something that you have to take stock of, because it goes back to what we were talking about that confidence, and about what we're going to talk about, right? The imposter syndrome, because it helps out, because now you have concrete. I actually did this.
Yeah, speaking of imposter syndrome, I want to talk about my mother because she always talking about how STEM professionals are up in the hierarchy, career ladder, and the helping services. Because my mother was a counselor. She worked in the health department, and she's a counselor. She got a degree, a master's degree in counseling, and so she doesn't get paid as much at and it's critical. I've made her negotiate higher, and they're not gonna take like then don't take the job. I feel like
Mhm.
we lowball ourselves by taking stuff lower than we deserve, especially in the helping services. We lowball ourselves. So, and there might be a reason because you're talking about yourself like, oh, they're in hierarchy and we're lower. You got to stop saying that. You got to stop
That,
speaking. Speak
that's
what
not
you
what she
seek.
said.
That's what she said. She said we're
She said
higher.
that
There.
I interpret it as
Go ahead.
there's more of a hierarchy in our and ladder in our arena. Maybe let me look at it
No,
again. No.
she's saying STEM careers are are hierarchy in the career arena, meaning STEM
Okay.
careers always are better than. And she said it earlier. She made the point earlier, and I didn't talk about it. So she back again and say, yeah. So she's just talking about helping professions always get lowballed. STEM professions get more money because they're more of a prestigious career in hierarchy. Jonice says, I'm asking what the need of the team, speaking to that. Also, if there is a human service aspect, that is also where I will find alliance. I guess she's talking about what she could provide. But but coming to the imposter syndrome, many STEM professionals struggle with undervaluing their expertise. Yes, mommy, STEM professionals too. We undervalue ourselves too. What advice would you give to someone who's hesitant to negotiate because they don't feel they deserve more? What's up with this imposter syndrome thing? We've been talking about it a lot. What is that?
Yeah,
I
I don't
think
know. I think a lot of, to me, it's about just like you said, being worth something, but not knowing that value,
Yeah.
not knowing that value, and it's you can't. It's tough because you can't find it in other people. You can't find it in all these things. Like you have to actually build that confidence in yourself, right? Um, And so, yeah, it's a difficult thing because even, I mean, just that I struggle with it, right? It's like, okay, you know what? Where should I be in this hierarchy? Should I go into that area? Am I, am I professionally,
Qualified?
yeah, qualified for that? And and so, yeah, it is. I guess you just have to kind of balance it on stuff that you already, kind of know where you are and know where you feel comfortable. So like I know where the spaces I feel comfortable speaking, right? And the spaces that I can, kind of display a little expertise, and I try to navigate those spaces. But it's difficult. It's difficult.
Especially in STEM where it's like, majority percentages are white and Asian, right? And very little African American, very little black. So you have this feeling of like, do I belong here? And do they think I belong here? And if they don't think I belong here, and I feel like they make it clear that many times they don't think we belong here.
Well, I don't
Th- th-
know. I see it for me. I see it from a different. I see it in the fact that I have to always remind myself you can't be an expert at everything, right?
Mhm.
Because in our fields, there's always going to be a person who is great at this certain aspect. And so you look at that and you're just like, "Oh man, you know what? That's the aspect that I kind of work in. Should I be that great?" And there's another person with this aspect and okay, you know what? Maybe I should, know that stuff too, right? And just said for me as a developer, right? There's a bunch of different fields of it. You have DevOps. Now you have the AI stuff. You have all these different things where people, and even with inside those disciplines, like there's so many other little nuances to it, and so everybody is an expert at something. And I think that's something that that we have, always keep in mind. In biology, there's always a specific aspect of something that somebody is zoned in on and they know. And there's always going to be someone who knows something better than you, but it's just like, where do you fall in what you do?
Come on, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say that this topic of imposter syndrome kind of brings me back to our previous conversation about
Yeah.
microaggressions, because I think the reason why, particularly people in our community, in the Black community, struggle with this, both male and female, is because a lot of those are the microaggressions
Right.
along the way. I think you may not even have realized that it had an effect on you growing up, but I think it put little cracks in your confidence along the way. I remember when I got accepted to Albert Einstein,
Whoop, whoop.
which is, I know, right? Pretty good medical school, right? One of the top medical schools in the country. And somebody said to me, you only got in because of,
Affirmative action.
affirmative action. And I was like, and I thought back about, my academic accomplishments and all the other things I did just to even get into medical school. And it shouldn't even have lingered
But of course.
in my head that, I'm this person suggesting that I'm not qualified to go to the school. But it was there because I spent a lot of time trying to prove to other people and myself that I do belong there, and then little things along the way during, especially in STEM career, we see it so much that these little things kind of, put little cracks in your confidence. And then when you end up, in your job or wherever you are, you kind of start doubting yourself and thinking, oh, I don't belong here. And so I think we have to acknowledge that does influence where this even comes from. But it does require you having an internal look and trying to build yourself up, because that nobody's going to be able to fix that for you. That's something you're going to have to work on internally, to convince yourself that you are qualified and you belong where you are.
Yeah. Go ahead, Howard.
So, and we have to have these experiences and because a lot of it is two-pronged, right? It's what the things that we experience, the microaggressions, and then that can also feed into how we feel, right? And so we know whether we are a minority in an arena or not. Like, right, if a Caucasian guy ends up on that NBA team and he's only 6'2", is he gonna catch it. He gonna feel like, am I good enough to be here, right? And so, while that doesn't necessarily happen in an engineering class for one of our Asian brothers or sisters, right? They don't necessarily feel like, should I be here, right? One of my friends, when I was an RA back in school, one of my colleagues, and all my colleagues when I was an RA were pretty much, in what do you call it, arena, in Mom Byfield's arena, right? In the people arena, right? And I think she was doing, I forgot what she was in, let's say counseling, right? And I remember it was toward finals, and I was driving next to her and I was saying, "Hey, what's going on?" And she's like, "Hey, how's finals going? Da 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 da." And and she was on the passenger side of the car, and I just finished my a lab report that I had done, for an upper level lab class, a biotech lab class that I had, and it was an upper level class, and I got an A on it, and I was really proud of it, but I was just like, I was just like, it's just going through the motions, right? And so she was like, "How's everything going?" And so she saw the paper there with the A on it, right? And she was like, "You got an A in it?" I was like, "Oh, okay, go ahead." Like, you know, and I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Well, what class is that?" And I was like, you know how when non-scientists people ask you, but then I'm like, I gotta, try to explain this word to her, right? These words for this class, right? And she was like, "Dude, you're like a rocket scientist. Like, what do you?" And I
That's
was
how I would
like,
have sounded. That's
right? And I was just like, no, it's really not that, then we start to get all nerdy with it, right? No, it's not really. It's just da 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 da, tissue, da 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 da,
Nah,
and she was like, exactly. Like, I can't even pronounce that, Howard. Like, what do you like, man? Keep going. You know what I
that's
mean?
it.
So then there's those experiences, right?
Right.
Where it was just like, wow, because she's also looking at me like she knows the story at the time that I was the only person, that I was the only black male in that in one of the only black one of I think I was the only black male in my graduating class, actually, in for my major. So
Mhm.
she knew that that was my situation. So to hear that sort of thing was affirming for me, like, yeah, no, you no, you could do this stuff. Like, you
Mhm.
doing it. Like, you're in the midst of, you're not trying. No, you're not trying. No, you're actually doing it.
You're
And
doing
those are the
it.
type of things that, that help with your confidence.
George says mindset is a topic to address for minorities in STEM careers. You have no idea, bro. Like what growth mindset.
Hmm.
Growth mindset is what I'm huge on growth mindset with my students. So I don't know, George, if you know, I'm a professor of biology, and you'd be surprised how many students, especially students of color, do not believe they can.
Hmm.
They I I have students that I know are smart and know the material. They keep doing bad on tests. I said, stop studying. I want you to watch this video on growth mindset, and their grade shifts.
Mhm,
Because it's not that they don't understand, it's that they don't believe they understand. Because
mhm,
all through their high school, they have been made to feel that they aren't smart, they don't belong in STEM, they don't belong, they don't belong. We are fighting our way, and it's actually unhealthy for our mental health. Imposter syndrome hurts African Americans' mental health because we're trying so hard to prove we belong. We're exerting so much energy into that
Hmm.
versus just being. It's serious. Um, Joe says, I think imposter syndrome also comes from how we see our leaders and how
Hmm.
we feel we compare. It's hard to see yourself from the outside, and it's so true. And this is why I'm trying to have more and more, like at least once a month with us coming together. I'm glad you guys came on the team with me to really let people see,
Hmm.
and I love it. We have different levels of education. We got a bachelor's degree, we have master's degree, we have PhD, we have MD, right? Male, female, all black. Shout out to all the four. I'm claiming it for Baltimore Ravens. All four quarterbacks gonna be in the championship next week. You know what I'm saying? Like, we could do it, and they've been telling us, and they told us that in football, like, you can't be a quarterback.
Hmm.
Yes, you can. And let's move it from the sports to now to STEM. Let's move it from the sports to STEM. Anybody else have anything to say about imposter syndrome? All right, let's move on. Joy said something that was pretty cool. She said, "Can anyone transition from earning a salary to generating income in STEM careers?" And that is critical. And I don't know necessarily in the terms of generating for where I'm working, but that's where I'm pushing, generating income through business. As a STEM professional, we need to overcome the imposter syndrome in terms of that, like feeling that I'm getting an education to work for somebody rather than create business for myself, or create, go into fields that, raises are given to people who increase their revenue. Right now we're not in fields, most of us aren't in fields like that. And that's what happens with life sciences too. And I think all of us work in life sciences. We Nobody's trying to generate revenue. You're not trying to generate revenue at the government. You're not trying to generate revenue in academia. You're not really trying to generate revenue in healthcare and pharmaceutical companies. You know what I'm saying? But that's, well, yeah, they trying to generate revenue, but not the way, like, not like it's still a life science company. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. My
go ahead.
perspective on it is changed over the years. So,
Okay.
all my life, all I saw was like my dad running businesses, right? So all I
Yeah.
saw was entrepreneurship. You know what I mean? And working for a company is something that I knew was out there, but it wasn't like, okay, you know what, this is the way, right? You should always be trying to find some way to. And so, I had a business for probably about 11 years. And it was nice. It was great. And then I started doing development stuff, for companies, and liked it, kept going. And
Hmm.
it took me maybe 5, 6 years after that to realize that, I still love entrepreneurship, right? I think it's great. But, especially where I'm at now, seeing the way people enjoy the idea of publishing, right? Seeing, like, there's another world out there. For me, it was always like, okay, you have to own, you have to go and get this, and there's certain space for that, right? Especially for us as minorities, because we need to own stuff, because we don't.
It's
But
true.
but
Absolutely.
there is, it takes a certain person, and it takes a certain grind to have a business and make it successful.
Yeah.
And not everybody's cut out for that, right?
Right.
Not everybody can sacrifice for that.
Right.
And not everyone will enjoy it. So,
Right.
just and I
At
bring it
least
back to
not
the
full
question.
time.
Was
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I bring it back to the question, is that, yeah, there always is, ways to go, especially if you're in STEM, because we all know how to do stuff, right? Like, if I had a ton of hours in the day, I can go write a program, right? Howie, if you wanted to go and make some formulation, right? I'm sure if you had enough time, you can go and do, like, you can do, like, come on, you can have your own practice. Everybody can go out and have their own thing. It's just a matter of the desire, right? The desire, and the mindset to want to go out and grind every day.
Right.
I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
with what happens, George, with the STEM fields is that one of the benefits is that because they tend to be lucrative, with these different scales and so forth, depending on, education as well as seniority, etc., time put in. But and the technical aspect of it, it's valuable, right? And so what happens is
Yes,
a
mommy.
lot of
That's
a
why we
lot of
make more
time.
money. Go ahead, Howard.
Not more about, I mean, that's the problem with the Western culture. We don't see, mental health and these types of things as valuable, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and even education as valuable. But
Right.
so we get we don't have we can make salary without putting in that much time.
Right.
So what happens is we
Right.
tend to have space for entrepreneurship if we like.
Mhm.
We tend to have space where we can say, "Hey, I'm gonna do this thing on the side as well,"
Side. Right.
and so our salaries can actually help to we can leverage our salaries to 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 invest our
Right.
time and energies in things that do generate revenue.
Hence phenomenal STEMist,
Mhm.
and like I make six figures with phenomenal STEMist. Without it, I'm just short of it. And I still have months off, right? This is the value of STEM. So this is a value like academic. Yeah, I would be a little further away from six figures, but because I have academia leverage with a STEM grants, leverage with a business, then it's easy, and it's still the same or less amount of time than somebody else. You feel me? So it's like, why I have to put all that kind of work to make something where I'm safe. But it's still a good question.
Mhm.
But that's the beauty of STEM. We don't have to move as far like a physician will make $250,000, right? Uh, without bonuses. While somebody, in order to get $250,000, would have to work this, and get the bonuses. You know.
I know people who do the government contracting
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and bank there.
Mhm.
From what I
Yeah.
understand, I don't, not in my arena, but I have some buddies who operate in that sort of thing, especially in IT.
Mhm.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about handling pushback and negotiation wins. Like, anybody experience pushback? And if an employer pushes back, what are some practical ways to respond without jeopardizing the offer? So I don't have that skill. I don't get it. I didn't get any pushback. I told them this, and this. I've done this, and they took it. No drama. And I've only worked with in one job for the past 16 years. But anybody else have a story?
I mean, I've negotiated um, my evaluation grade, and for some, in some instances, actually no, in that instance, yeah, in some instances, your evaluation grade does result in a promotion, right? I've had
Mm,
a manager say, I've had a manager say, ask me, so why do so this is what I've seen for this year from you. Um, what say you? Um, and I said, well, and what do you think? What do you think you should your score, your overall score should be? And it was one of those years where I just happened to be on it. I think the Lord was working with me. I just happened to be on it, Jamal. I wrote it all down. I had been writing it that year. I don't know. I was like, nah, even if this is just for myself, I'm just gonna write everything down, and
Like it.
and so my manager had said that, and I was just like, I was ready. I was kind of ready.
Mm,
Um, but I didn't expect her to say that. So I was ready, but I didn't expect her to say that. I didn't expect her. I was gonna say her or him. Dang, I didn't expect them to give me the platform.
that to
mhm,
do that.
And that was interesting. So when they gave me the platform, I was like, well, in actuality, this is what I think, and let me tell you. And I said I think it should be this grade, honestly. And they were like, really? And they were like, well, why do you say that? And I was like, I'm glad you asked. And I just started
mhm,
hitting it, and they were just like, you know what, I'm in agreement with you.
mhm.
And they raised it up. They raised it
Wow.
up. And I had never experienced that before. But again, it's the whole thing of, I still waited for it. Like, I still waited for
You
I
didn't
still
negotiate. You
waited.
didn't come to them.
Nah,
Yeah.
I didn't say, well, no, let me tell you this. So I can't say that I really figured it out how to actually counter. I was given an opportunity to counter.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
gotta be ready either
Yeah.
way, right?
And that's what I'm hearing from you and Jamal. Like, write
Mhm,
that stuff down and be
yeah.
ready to lay it out because you have it written.
Yeah.
Come on,
But
you
I
want
think,
go ahead, Jamal.
yeah, I was gonna say that to me, I could think of two scenarios, right? The first scenario is um, you've been doing great, or you have good managers, and then they're just like the situation with Howard, right? Howard, you go in and they're like, okay, you know what, this is great. Or you approach them and say, hey, you know what, this is what I've been doing. I would like a raise, right? Or I would like to negotiate this. And they're like, yeah, that's this is good. We'll see what we can do, right? And we'll meet you halfway. But then the other aspect is just like you said. Sometimes the deal is on the line, and that's another one where you find yourself in a situation where you've already done the math and you're saying, hey, I'm grossly underpaid, right? And we need to level this thing up. And so I think those are two totally differentiate. Like, say for instance, I go to my manager, I feel I should probably make more money, but it's not super pressing, but I need to at least state my case, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to talk with them, and all is well, either way. I would like to go higher, but I've talked with them. But in the latter case, where you find yourself grossly underpaid, right? um, you know, that's a point where you have to kind of set your your kind of boundaries on where what you want. So,
Yeah.
is that particular job, is it worth being there to be, you
Grossly
know,
underpaid.
yeah, are
Yeah.
they
Strong point.
offering you something in terms of peace that other jobs wouldn't? And then if it's not, then when you go talk to them about your job, you have to have your number and you got to stand firm, right? And you have to be willing to say, all right, you know what, I'll go out and source source myself and try to find something different. But at the same time, when you do that, the only way it matters, the only way it can be a negotiation is if you actually are worth that, right?
Got your ducks in a row, and that's what you're always going
You
back
know what I'm
to.
saying?
Well,
Yeah, so you got to
make
be
sure.
worth it, man. You got to be worth it. And it goes back. I talked to someone years ago, and one of the things, he was leading an office, and he's like, Jamal, all these people come up to me and they're like, they want a raise and they want all this stuff, and he's like, but they not doing nothing extra. They not doing nothing that matters. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you like? What you know what I'm saying? Like, if you come to somebody and you say, "This is what I want," like, it has to be more than what you're supposed to be doing. You see what I'm saying? So if
Yeah.
I come and I say, you know what, I've been doing all the stuff that I normally do, then you should get paid what you normally get paid, right? The only way that you can justify saying, you know what, I need more money is if you show that you have better skills. And I run across this with, that's at developers all the time, because I'm all for letting people know the keys, like giving them the keys, because it's easy to pick up a book and read and just start going at it. But that doesn't mean you're doing it correctly, right? You can get something like, everybody goes to that one mechanic that can get their car running, but it's not running like the dealership if you took it there. You see what I'm saying? They're going to have some wires hanging over here. They're going to have some stuff over here. And so it's like, look, if you read these books, if you do these things, right, you'll unlock a totally different level. And, they'll be like, oh, that's great. And then put it to you know what I'm saying?
So Jamal,
And
I got a
so
question
it's
for you,
crazy.
man. So,
Mm.
so then, so then, how much do you play the role of, so okay, that sounds to me like, okay, we need to encourage folk to know, right? To find out what is needed. Like you got to know. You can't, right? You
You
got to
gotta
know.
know.
You
I
got to
tell people
find
to
out
start with career
what is
builders.
needed in order to get to that next thing, right? Because
Yes.
then if you come to your to your buddy there and say, man, well, I did this, and they're like, well, so what? Like, you know what I mean? And they can't say that necessarily,
Yeah,
right?
it's not that, because it's
Right?
respectful, but it's just really like, this is real money, right? So this is real money that runs a real facility. And so like I have to really
Mm,
justify, all
hmm.
right, you know what, bro, that's an extra $20,000. That's an extra $30,000. And so that may not sound big in this scheme of things, but if you multiply that by 80 people that you work with, and everybody come to you and say, you know what I'm saying, the number starts growing fast. And so it's just a matter of, all right, you know what, if you want to move to the next level, right, what and why? You know what I mean?
But I just don't think that the others have to do that. I feel like they just say, "Hey, I want to raise spot," and okay. I feel like am I
Nah,
am I
I,
am I wrong? Am I wrong? I feel like other people just can go to their boss and say, "Okay,
nah, people
I,
don't
I
just
want a
walk into their
bonus."
boss's office and say get a raise. Now, I will say though that I have seen situations where not so much like in the STEM field where it's like, okay, you know what, I want a raise and they get a raise or whatnot and all that. What I have seen is, in the business community, right? If I'm Jamal and, I know Kamoy and Kamoy's like, hey, you know what? This VP position opened up, man. We're really cool. I know, and this is the systematic stuff, right?
Yeah,
Look, I know your skills. I'm gonna be interacting with this person every day,
yep.
and I would love for you to have this job, right?
yeah,
And so now they're essentially pulling someone and putting them into that
right,
position.
I,
Like
yeah.
that's totally different than
Got
coming, you
you,
know what I mean? So
got
those are
you.
two totally different worlds.
Yes,
But
you're
if
right.
I'm just doing my normal job and I'm like, okay, you know what? Even if I'm friends with the boss, because there's so many different, especially if you're working in a bigger institution, right? The justification for an increase in salary is just a hurdle all in itself. You know what I'm
Got
saying?
you.
If you're in small business or medium sizes, you have a lot more flexibility, but it's just the hurdle. So it's a tough thing. But yeah, it is there is a good old boys club, but a lot of that.
That's not the same as negotiating up. That's just
Yeah,
getting your
it's
way into.
not the same.
Got
So
you.
negotiating to me with salary is really about I'm high valued and like how much am I worth to this department? And if that's the case,
In the
then they
position that
have
I'm
to,
in.
yeah, it's like they have to work with you, because if you really are serious, your number isn't a game, right? It's a, like, look, this is what I want, or or I'm gonna have to like look for other stuff, or I'm gonna be here, I'll work, but I'm gonna still be kind of honing my craft, and we'll revisit this later. But it's something serious, right? It's a line. But you have the only way it matters is if people are serious and they're pushing themselves forward. And a lot of that is what kind of, this is why we have this, right? This is what we do. Like, all of us have some type of thing that we're doing to drive and push things forward. Like how you've been where you're at for years, right? You're out here training other people, doing other things like that. You know what I mean?
So
And
that's
so,
why I
like,
mentioned it.
there's so much stuff, Kamoy, right? You're like, this is like, you're always learning. You're always, like, as doctors, I know for Kara, she's always doing some type of training, right? So, these are the things that's just like, all right, you know what? I gotta, publishing, all these things. So, you always have to be pushing yourself forward, because you have to have the justification. Yeah, you
Listen,
gotta.
Joni says her she has a story.
Hmm.
Her first rebuttal was the first she was talking about the current salary. Then she had another meeting to have a second rebuttal to talk about her credentials and her skills. And then she had a third meeting and she was like, "This is my story. Like, you're asking me to leave New York. You're asking me to leave this, to leave da 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 da." Like, she worked. She did multiple rebuttals.
Hmm.
Like, I'm proud of you, girl. She got what she wanted. Um, it's so she was back and forth with the pushback.
You gotta
I
stay
guess
with it.
she just stood her ground. She stood her ground, and I think she's also telling me, which I feel like you're telling me, you bit off one thing at a time versus just trying to tackle all three of them. You did one at a time, and so that was a good story. Um, you want to say something on pushback, Kamoy? Or are you good? We're gonna move on to the last conversation. You want to say something?
Nope.
All right. So let's talk about personal stories. Anybody can talk about any personal stories or strategies that work for them. While you thinking of it, Jonice asked a question like, "Whose job is static?" I guess what is a normal job? I think my job is static. I've been in this job for 16 years. I've been teaching the same classes. I think I added to my job by getting a grant, but other than that, somebody who didn't do that is they're just moving up the steps. They just get 3% raises every year. They're just moving up the steps and getting more money as they move up, just making more money naturally. Like, we don't have to negotiate raises. We naturally get raises. We naturally move up steps. We naturally make more money as we stay in our tenure for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And then if you get a grant, you just exponentially grow that. So there are some jobs that are kind of like static. I don't
Mine
know.
is very static. I consider it to be very static. We
Government.
go up, we go up and go up, but we go up to there's a cap. There's
Yep.
a cap to it. So depending on what grade you are, there's a step cap. So and it's all, if you don't do anything extra and you can just make sure you don't blow the place up, I'm saying, like, you will go to the next, but it's all
But Joe,
it's
you got a government job, Joe. Like, you know that. Go ahead, Howie.
it's time oriented. It's time
Yeah,
oriented, right?
yeah.
Um, but I mean, to the extent that, like I mentioned about, letting people know what you've done for the, annually, that is something that I was told by a person of color way back when I started. The same thing that you mentioned, Jamal, that because they were trying to get, and I was wet behind the ears in my 20s, and they were like, write everything down, and they actually had a portal where the people of color that were in that group, um, or in the occupation,
Right.
you would submit it to them,
Hmm.
and they would actually, it kept you accountable. You'd submit it to them, and they would have a listing of where everybody was at, so that so that you could know along the way. Um, oh man, what was I gonna say? So that whole process of doing that is something that I figured, let me continue to do that. There was something, what was I mentioning? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Man, there's something I wanted to mention real quick. Oh my gosh.
We're talking about personal stories that led to a major salary increase.
Oh, I was gonna say, thank you. I was gonna say that many of there are many of us who, because it's so static, when it comes to that, that annual evaluation, a lot of people just don't even write anything. They're like, it doesn't matter. Like,
Oh, yeah.
they're like, it doesn't matter.
Next step.
They go to the evaluation, and because they know how some of this stuff is, is canned, and some of this stuff is just, unfortunately, like, for example, when you have a brand new manager, and it's
Yeah.
within that, that thing, and it's within and they come in at the, in the middle of evaluation, everybody
Hmm.
gets the same score across the board. Oh my gosh, it's so annoying. And it's just like, yo, I was just up here last year under
Hmm.
my previous manager. I'm still doing the same stuff. I
But
did.
it's a new manager that don't know
It's
how
a
to
new man,
score.
so they just hit you at the same. I get so heated with it, but it's the culture. That's just
Yeah.
It's
what
the
they
culture.
do, and I'm like,
Yeah.
and so because of that, and if you experience that over a number of years, folk
Yeah.
are just like, it is what it
It don't
is.
matter.
Yeah.
It'll be what it's gonna be.
Mhm. Yeah, you got to
That's
have
how
good, and that's the
static.
thing too. A lot of it still depends on good management, right? And so, that's just that I've been fortunate to where I've had good managers, and I attribute that to just I can't. My wife's the same way, man. It's difficult for us to work at places that like it's where the management's not great, and
But it's
so but
because
yeah, that's
the
middle.
salary's not going to change anyway. Like,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like, it's
yeah,
static, because the salary's not it's not going to change. You're not negotiating any higher. Like,
yeah.
Higher.
it's gonna be what it's
So
gonna
it
be.
is what it is. Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I hope you learned from us. Come on, you wanted to say something?
I
Yeah.
just wanted to mention, just in case anyone was wondering about, whether or not
Yeah.
doing medicine
Yeah.
is static, for sure. But that's
Mhm.
dependent on you. How much do you want to make? And you can tailor your practice to that. And there's
Mhm.
no cap.
Woo!
The sky's the limit.
No cap in medicine. Listen, in life sciences, I would have loved to have maybe other careers on here that may have ability to know how to negotiate through business, but in STEM, it's not as negotiable. It can be. So we gave some examples, but I feel like what we learned today, this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you got to change your mindset. You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe that you belong. That's number one. You got to believe that you belong. Change your mindset. Have confidence. Be an advocate for yourself. And the
Mhm.
best way to do that is by making sure that you actually qualify. Like, you do work. You have the skill set. You have studied. You have developed projects. You have it. And number three, you have evidence of it. You have written it down. You have documented everything that you have done as proof positive that you deserve a higher step, a higher role, a promotion. Sometimes, like we might be static in our steps, but we are not necessarily static in our promotion. Like, we can get another job that will give us the step up and get more money that way versus necessarily negotiating a
Mhm.
higher salary for the current job. But you gotta believe in yourself. You gotta do the work, and you gotta document it. Am I right? Is that the gist of what you guys said?
I
We
love
went a
it.
little longer
Yeah.
today, but I feel like this is a very, very, very important topic because listen, this is your money and this is compounded money that you'll be missing if you don't put yourself in spaces to get more. So
Okay. One thing
listen,
I
go
one thing
ahead,
I'll
go ahead.
add to it, and I didn't realize this till I was older, but the significance of your first job. So,
Mm,
you know, one thing that's super critical is understanding that you only move up. So if your base is low, you're starting low and you're moving up from that lower number.
yes.
But if you start out $30,000 higher, then
And
everything jumps higher because all your increases, all your stuff is based off percentages. So
that's right.
everything you get on top of that matters. And so, you know, and this my, you know, Ian's in college right now, you know, so that's where I'm going to start drilling into him. You know, I'm letting him get his first year down pat. But the next thing is, hey, you know, you have to make sure your first step matters, right? You know, for a bunch of different reasons. And I think that's what folks that don't look like us, I think they have a significant advantage like that because they're being placed in
Mm,
places immediately
yeah.
that get them, you know what I'm saying, where they need to go faster. And so I think that's one thing we always need to watch out for. We don't necessarily have to come out of college and work entry, you know what I'm saying? Like we can come out, we already can have skills and make some money. So yeah, that first job.
That is so critical. I'm gonna say that because when my first job is the current job, but I jumped 4 steps higher because I made sure that I included everything that did in my
Hmm.
training to get this current job. So I'm 4 steps higher than what they were gonna give me.
Hmm.
And that mattered because you imagine if I had started 4 steps lower, I would be making 4 steps lower currently because I did not jump the steps based on previous. And so this is critical. Jump the steps.
Hmm.
Look at the things that you were doing in college, in internship, in postdoc, and jump the steps because that might be your only time to jump the steps
Hmm.
and then move progressively up from that point.
Hmm.
Powerful, powerful, powerful thought. I am the phenomenal STEMist, and so are these people right here. Good night, everybody. I hope you have a great Martin Luther King Day weekend. Shout out to MLK. Forget whatever else is going on tomorrow. Forget whatever else is going on
It's gonna be
tomorrow.
a
See
cold day
y'all.
tomorrow in
It's gonna be a
Colorado.
cold day all over the country. All right. See y'all.